So, first of all, a very good morning, everybody. Welcome along to my session, Monty WiFion on the quest for Holy Grail of network security. My name is Andy Malone. I'm an MVP and an MCT certified trainer. I'm based in Scotland, the old country. I've been training now for about 16 years. If you want my details, there's my little tag there. You can take a snapshot of that. And we're going to be talking today about wireless security, or maybe insecurity. A little bit of both, really. So topics we're going to talk about, we're going to do a little bit of history. We're going to go back and talk about how it all started. Here's a question for you guys. Why did they invent Wi-Fi? What was the purpose? Any ideas? Get rid of cables. The number of presentations that have started off, it was invented for military purposes, is absolutely rubbish. Absolutely rubbish. Absolutely correct. Okay, see me later, I'll give you a shirt for that. That was a great answer. Okay, so we're going to talk about current and emerging Wi-Fi technologies. Well, not just Wi-Fi, but wireless technologies, because there are quite a few of them. So we're going to talk about NFC, we'll talk about RFID, we'll talk about Wi-Fi, and so on. I want to concentrate, obviously, on wireless security, or the insecurity, because there's still a lot of people out there that are nervous about wireless. And you know, to be honest, if you ask me, Andy, you know, give me some advice. I want to be absolutely secure. What is the best way to go and do this? And I would say, you know, maybe think about moving to Sweden in the winter, build an igloo or something like that, and take your little computer and don't have it on the internet. That's the most secure way. We'll talk about standards and techniques, we'll talk about threats and countermeasures, and we're also going to talk about some myths here as well. So some common myths which are just simply not true. And then again, we'll talk about some best practices as well. So first up then, we're going to talk about just an introduction and history of Wi-Fi. You know, every year I like to do something a little bit quirky. I like to think about a topic, something that, you know, is generally not spoke about. And, you know, people come in, they talk about Wi-Fi hacking and all of that. I wanted to come in and give you the whole picture. So this is the purpose of this session. So first of all, Wi-Fi was invented in the Netherlands. So if there's any Dutch people here, you can give yourself a pat on the back. In actual fact, it was invented in a place called Nieuwegein, which I know very well. This guy here, Vic Hayes, who worked for a company, well, it was basically NCR, National, what was it? National Cash Registers, thank you very much. Yes, and AT&T, they basically came together with this idea of creating this Wi-Fi connection for stores and outlets and so on. So basically, he took that a little bit further, and he's really known today now as the father of Wi-Fi. So he really came up with the standards of 802.11b and A and so on. However, you know, the company that he worked for, Azure, really didn't do so well. So it's a little bit like if you look back into the 1990s, companies like IBM, they designed the first PC, and then of course was it PS2? They came up with the PS2, and before that, of course, it was basically everywhere, and everybody had copied that really good design. So basically in 2003, he came up with this idea of this next generation of Wi-Fi system, but unfortunately, already it was kind of superseded by market forces. So he basically retired as well, so he kind of stepped down, which was a little bit of a shame, but I'm sure he's still a very wealthy man. So, in terms of regulations, there are a number of organizations throughout the world that regulate all of this. So the first one is the FCC. They regulate all the ISM bands, so from 2.4 megahertz to 5.8 megahertz, and this is the main body. The IE, of course, the Institute of Electrical Engineers, they basically develop the wireless LAN standards throughout the world. ETSI, by the way, is the organization in Europe that does this. They developed something called the HyperLAN 2, very, very similar to the systems that we use today. And of course, we have the well-known Wi-Fi Alliance, or WECA. And so whenever you go out today and you buy a piece of Wi-Fi equipment, the chances are it's going to have this little sticker on it here, endorsed by the Wi-Fi Alliance. So the standards themselves, you look at this and you think, hey, Andy, that's not just Wi-Fi, is it? Of course not. It's all forms of communication. So looking at the top of the list here, you see your token ring, your Ethernet technologies, and then moving down, you see your Wi-Fi technologies, so 802.11. You move up to your 802.15 band range, and this is where you're looking at things like NFC, RFID, and your very narrow band communications. The latest one down at the bottom there talks about the emergency services group. So the emergency services at the moment are developing their own systems, and more information on that will be forthcoming in due course. So that's the standards. Okay, so what are the benefits of Wi-Fi? Well, a number of you mentioned it earlier. No cables. Hey, great. You can surf the internet in your toilet if you want to. I know many people who do. You can go outside, but they do obviously have a limited range, and that was actually a security reason. So unlike normal kind of packet radio, where you would traditionally have to have a license for it, any ham radio people here? Anybody do ham radio years ago? Okay, well, ham radios, CB radios and all of that, depending on the country that you were in, you would have to have licenses for that. So with Wi-Fi, because the range is kind of limited, they took that out of the equation, so that's good. So cuts cabling costs. The products are just everywhere. And I don't know about you, but I feel that Wi-Fi is taking over the world. I mean, we now have fridges that are Wi-Fi capable. We have cars that are Wi-Fi capable. So, you know, it's absolutely everywhere. So various degrees of encryption are available, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. So basically, the nice thing about Wi-Fi is no matter where I go, unlike my mobile phone, my cell phone, as you guys call it here, if I go to different countries, there are different standards. So you have to have roaming agreements. It has to be compatible before you can use it. So whether it's dual band, tri-band, quad band, and so on. But that doesn't happen with Wi-Fi. So I go out and use a laptop. I buy it here in the US. I can take it home. I can plug it in, and it works just perfect. So it's a global standard. Fantastic. Okay, so looking at wireless technologies now. What are the different types of wireless technologies? Well, first of all, just a little bit about the basics. Everything needs an SSID. So an SSID, of course, identifies the service set identifier. The channel number in the US is between 1 and 11. In the European countries, we have 1 to 13. It's an alphanumeric string. You can't hide it. Well, actually, you can hide it. You can change the name of it. But there are issues. So, there's misconceptions about hiding and changing names and so on. We'll talk about those near the end of the session. So when you have your router, or router, as you guys call it here, you plug it in, and it can be deployed in 2 modes, as you're aware. One, you can have ad hoc mode or a peer-to-peer environment. Very useful if you want to share information like a typical type of work group with your users. And the other one supports roaming, which of course is infrastructure mode. So very, very useful in very large organizations. So the basics as well, each access point identifies itself by a beacon and a series of frames. So it's not just a single beacon, there is a little bit of communication going on. Very much like DHCP. So to become part of this, part of the network, obviously you need to be authenticated onto the network. So again, the access point is generally responsible unless you're using a third-party mechanism, something like a radius server, for example. MAC addresses, of course, will also be used to identify the individual machine on the network as well. So, in terms of the basics, we have this kind of security encryption wrapper. And within the wrapper, we have the SSID broadcast. And this is always broadcast in clear text. So then we have the connection request. So the client comes in, says, yep, I want to go ahead and connect to your network. The authentication process happens. So whether that process is by putting in a key or by using a third-party mechanism, either way, you need to be authenticated on the network. There are still, it's very, very surprising, there are still tons of places where they don't have any kind of authentication. Here, for example, we can just connect to the Microsoft Wi-Fi system. Obviously, they trust you all. Obviously, they don't know you like I do. Okay, excuse me. So, the authentication process, and once the authentication process takes place, you're online. You get connected, you get access to resources, and so on. Okay, and everybody's happy. Now, the nice thing about products like Windows 7 and Windows Server 2008, that really came a long way in Wi-Fi connectivity. So it remembers everything. It caches everything. So if I, for example, one of the finest airport lounges in the world, by the way, is the SAS lounge in Copenhagen. So every time I go through Copenhagen, hey, boom, welcome back, Andy. I don't need to fill anything in. Thank you very much. Very nice. In terms of antennas, well, obviously, the bigger the antenna, the better. Yes, that's what they say. So there are two types, basically omnidirectional and directional. And you can also, if you want to, I remember these. Remember the old Pringles cans antennas? Anybody ever do things like war driving or anything like that? Not that you're going to admit it here, of course, but there you go. So if you want to make a very, very simple cantenna, Pringles cans were actually very good at the time. So what about the different standards? Well, let's just find out. I mean, do we have any older people than me in the room? So anybody remember Token Ring? Anybody remember that stuff? Oh gosh, you're old. Right. Wow. Wow. Do you remember those T-pieces and all of that? Golly, Wi-Fi is so good for that. Thank you. Okay. Who remembers? Let's just see who's the oldest person in the room besides me. Who remembers LAN Manager? Anybody remember LAN Manager? Wow. Anybody go further back than that? Anybody remember the abacus? Okay. So, standards. Okay, it's all about standards. The first one then, of course, 802.11a, and this was 54 megabits. Actually, it was 11b, really, the 11 megabits. And 11 megabits was fine. It had full speed. You had up to 300 feet of coverage. Of course, that was okay, but of course, the further you went away, the slower the speed, and obviously it was intermittent. It was superseded, of course, by 54 megabits. Now, 54 megabits G, so the thing about that, of course, is you needed to go out and buy new equipment. And it's amazing how many customers I have that still use old routers or old switches like this. And still use web. So because, of course, they go out, and so many customers don't go out and they update the what's the word? The BIOS, you know what I mean? Thank you, yes, the firmware, thank you, on the actual router. So they tend to use old technologies, which, of course, means that bad guys like Marcus Murray can easily hack in. Sorry, Marcus, if you're here. Okay, so the nice thing about the G, though, is it's backward compatible with previous versions, which makes it a lot easier. Although if you do use it in dual mode, it could be a little bit slower. So 802.11e, of course, it doesn't stop there. 802.11e really added in something that we all needed, was a quality of service. So this is particularly useful if you're streaming movies, multimedia, and so on. 11i, of course, was security. And security is, of course, absolutely critical in Wi-Fi. And really in 2001, that kind of changed when the US government actually said that Wi-Fi was a serious terrorist threat, believe it or not. So 11i, of course, adds in things like AES encryption, and it used TKIP, temporal key, as an interim kind of technology. Okay, so 11n, of course, is 100 megabit. So again, depending on what you're using your wireless access point for, what type of organization, it will determine what level of speed that you need, and also what level of authentication that you need. So let's talk about the different types of wireless technologies. So they're all the ones that I'm sure we're familiar with, using that 802.11 range. What about 802.11.15? Because this is really quite an exciting area, and there are a lot of developments here. So the first of those, of course, is Bluetooth. And Bluetooth has been out for a long time now. Bluetooth, of course, if you've got, I mean, we have Bluetooth devices everywhere, from headsets and players, and you tend to find them on a lot of cellular devices. So these are the different types of Wi-Fi systems that we've had. So older ones include things like cellular packet data, or CDPD, and that actually ran at 19.2 kilobits. So it was quite old, and that was an analog-based system. So GPRS kind of took over that. WAP, and then Ricochet, of course, that wasn't so successful. So Bluetooth and even BlackBerry as well, they have their own systems. RFID, and now the new NFC, or near-field communications. So NFC is really a very, very exciting technology, and it's going to make all our lives easier, you know, with things like automatic payment systems. So you'll be able to take your phone and actually touch a pad and pay for a ticket to a movie, or go to a basketball game or something just by touching a pad with your phone. Just think of the hacking possibilities there. Okay, so the first of them is Bluetooth. Okay, so again, in that 802.11.15 range, the key thing about this whole area of bandwidth is that it's very, very short range. Okay? So it operates at 2.45 gigahertz, and it is definitely used for mobile devices, and we use them every day. I always wonder, however, you know, using all these Bluetooth devices on our heads, if it will affect us in the future. If it will affect us in the future. If it will affect us in the future. Who knows? Okay, now in terms of hacking, this is no secret. There are a gazillion hacking tools out there for Bluetooth. And this is just some of them. Blue snarf, blue jacking. You just do a search in your favorite search engine, Bing, of course, and it will pull up a whole list of these tools. Okay. Andy, how can I protect myself? Well, obviously, you could, if you're going to use Bluetooth devices, make sure that the transmission is obviously encrypted. Okay, so another one is RFID. RFID has really evolved over the last 5, 6, 7 years to become a really quite an exciting technology. And we probably see this every day in smart cards, if you use cards to swipe you into your office, into your hotel room. Credit cards now use them. So a very, very clever way. So again, we have, it needs two things. So it needs obviously an interrogator, a reader to read the card. And the cool thing about this technology is you automatically assume that you have to be very, very close to the card reader. That's not the case. There are technologies out there that can read it from quite some distance away now. So in terms of hacking possibilities, I know that there was a couple of sessions at Black Hat where they did a very, very clever hacking example where half the room was FBI guys, and he brought up the names of all the FBI guys and their badges on the screen because there was a reader at the back of the room. That was kind of cool. Okay, so it's definitely seen this as, they actually refer to this as Bluetooth, the next generation of it. And you can see here that these devices are getting smaller and smaller. Very, very useful for monitoring and tracking and so on. So you find that there are a lot of security gadgets that are starting to come out that you can use for monitoring and tracking and so on. So obviously anybody passes through a reader, you can trace them through the likes of Google Earth, Bing Earth, whatever it's called. Okay. So RFID hacking, again, RFID tags can be cloned, unfortunately. So a growing number of hacking tools, for example, Backtrack, there are tools on there that allow you to clone these devices. But as security guys, hey, you guys shouldn't be afraid of this. You guys should be grasping this technology, because if you don't know about these things, if you don't know how they're being cloned, if you don't know how your organization is being attacked, how can you possibly defend against it? All right. So traditional hardware is very expensive. So the problem with hacking this technology is traditionally it was very, very expensive. But the actual readers, the interrogators, are really coming down in price. And you can buy them now from most Chinese websites. Okay, so you can read ID cards, badges, credit cards, and so on. So obviously, once you clone something, there is a website, dealextreme.com or something like that. Dealextreme.com had a very, very useful little device that you could buy, and it could actually clone these cards. So these hotel cards that you have here for the Marriott or the Omni Hotel, you can just put this on the pad, and it will duplicate the card. And what it does, it says, okay, what room do you want? You just change all the numbers to 9, and you've got a master key for the hotel. Okay, go and buy yours today. Okay. NFC, I love near-field communications. This is a really cool technology. I mean, I live in the UK, so London Transport have something called the Oyster card. So rather than messing around with paper cards, tickets and so on, you just basically subscribe to this card. It's a pay-as-you-go scheme. You just put £10 on it, £20 on it, and every time you go through a reader, it just deducts, the cost of the journey. Typically, NFC, though, it requires a distance of 4 centimeters or less, and it operates at a very low frequency range, so 13.56 megahertz. But there is a range that it actually works for. It always has to use an initiator, so there has to be some kind of reader. And the cool thing about it is, depending on how you set it up, is it will determine, hey, I'm just paying for something, or hey, do I need to do something like maybe an interactive display or something like that. So it's a very clever technology. We're all probably using NFC every day. More than you actually realize. So talking about how it's actually configured, there's 2 modes. One is emulation mode. So emulation mode essentially is just basically a reader, if you like. So an existing contactless card. So, here's my information. Reader mode, of course, is an active situation. So again, you walk past you're in a movie theater, for example. You walk past a reader, and the interactive display will show you a movie trailer of a film that will interest you. Or you're walking through a supermarket, and supermarkets can target a particular product to something that you have shown interest in the past, or your buying patterns can be stored, and so on. Things like smart posters, mobile phones. So there are an increasing number of cell phones out there that are NFC capable. So now you don't even need to buy a card. You don't even need to have an Oyster card, for example. Now all you need to do is download the app to the phone, and you just basically touch the phone to the reader, and it will deduct the payment. So again, very clever technology. So how does NFC compare? This is just like a little table I took the liberty of putting in here, just to show you a little bit of detail. The downside of wireless personal area networks, of course, which 802.15 is, the downside of these is the security issues. Now, Andy, is it possible to hack NFC? Well, theoretically, it is possible because it's not secure. So out of the box, it's not secure unless you actually decide to go and actually deploy it with the likes of SSL or something like that. Remember, it's a radio frequency. So radio frequencies can be picked up. So if you have a super huge antenna, then yes, it would be theoretically possible to actually read somebody's card information. So eavesdropping would potentially be a little bit of a problem. By the way, this picture, I don't know if I showed you this picture in the past. This is Oslo train station, and this is my stupid security picture. So this is an example of a NFC reader which opens the gate, but it's like, what's the point anyway, because you can just walk past. Okay. Also, you've got things like the dangers of relay attacks. And of course, the biggest danger is, hey, what happens if I lose my phone? Okay, yes, it's okay if you've got a smartphone. If you have a smartphone, you can maybe do an auto wipe on the smartphone. But, you know, they're saying now within 24 months, all new cell phones will have this technology. So if you lose your phone, Andy, if I lost my phone, does that mean, hey, if I put $100 on that NFC card, would I lose the $100? Well, first of all, the companies are actually deploying the technology, but they're not deploying it, allowing you to put that much money on it. We're only talking very small amounts of money. So $10, $20, $30, something like that max. So you are kind of semi-protected in that way. Another technology which is getting very large now is your metropolitan kind of Wi-Fi solution, WiMAX. You can see this one being deployed in Seattle. They're all actually being deployed in a number of major cities. In Europe, we're going through a big change at the moment with TV transmitters. So, you know, these great big huge TV masts. We're all changing from analog systems to digital television. So they're no longer using these great big TV masts. So they're actually, companies like BT, British Telecom, are disabling or shutting down all of these masts. And now they're actually coming up with a new project of WiMAX. So now when you go to the UK, the entire country will be one big wireless access point. How cool would that be? So the idea is that you can now browse on the go literally everywhere. And I know that a number of countries, including the US, are looking at these standards. Okay, so obviously everybody wants further Wi-Fi access. It's inconvenient to walk, you know, 100 yards and then you have to scan for another free Wi-Fi connection. By the way, I love the US, by the way. You guys have so much free Wi-Fi, it's great. Okay, except in hotels. They always charge you for Wi-Fi in hotels, don't they? And yeah, what is that about? Yeah, so they charge you for water here. What is that? Golly, good job they don't charge me to breathe. Okay. Is that next year? Okay. So, wireless security and authentication then. So we talked about, hey, where Wi-Fi came from. I'm going to grab a T-shirt here. Now, you might have to come to me because I can't see you because of these incredible bright lights here. So, can I get past here? Okay, so I've got a couple of T-shirts to give away. And I'm going to give one as a prize. The first person who tells me, what was the name of the guy that invented Wi-Fi? Who said Vic Hayes? Where are you? There you go. Thank you. Okay. Perfect. What is 802.11.15? Who said that? Well, oh, sorry. Pass it to him. You look like an honest kind of guy. Actually, is this okay? Can you guys see me here, yeah? So I can, oh, great, I can walk up and down. I love walking up and down. Okay, so we're going to talk about wireless security and authentication. And basically, we're going to talk about, I love this picture, by the way. I'll give you a moment to digest it. Okay, so basically, it all goes back to 2001. Did any of you see Peter Shipley's, I think it's on, you can watch it on YouTube. Did you see that? He did a DEF CON presentation where he spoke about war driving. And of course, the idea of war driving is that you get your car with a big antenna, and on there you can basically pick up and connect to everybody's Wi-Fi connection for free. Well, obviously, the US was going through a rather traumatic time at that point, and the Department of Homeland Security actually said, hey, hang on a minute, this Wi-Fi thing is dangerous. It potentially is a security threat. So you need, if you're going to use this technology, you need to basically secure it. So how are you going to do that? Okay. So the problem with Wi-Fi is it's seen as shared media. So if I connect to a shared volume, a shared folder, any kind of shared resource, of course, there are dangers with that. So authentication is definitely a requirement here. So once you're authenticated, then you can connect, then you can have access to the resources. So there are two types of encryption, encryption that Wi-Fi supports. One of these, of course, works at the very low level of the network model, and this is link encryption. And why is that best? Well, because the lower down the network model, the more secure that you are. So in this case, it essentially encrypts all the traffic headers and the data. And the nice thing for the users is this is completely transparent. The other type of encryption is quite familiar to us. This is end-to-end encryption. So technologies like IPsec and so on would be useful here. And the nice thing about this is network devices have nothing to do with it. These tend to run at the application layer. So here's a little diagram of that. So you can see the Wi-Fi technologies, the link technologies operate at the link layer of the network model. So again, for the user, once you're authenticated, you can get access to the network. So obviously at the top there, application layer, HTTPS, TLS, transport layer security, SSL, and so on, secures it at the application layer. What's best? A combination of all of these things, of course. All these slides, by the way, are available for you guys to download. So current authentication mechanisms, or programs, if you will, there are two. One is called the OSA, the Open Systems Authentication, and the other one is Shared Key Authentication. So if you're developing some kind of encryption algorithm, technology, it could meet either of these specifications. So shared key uses the encrypting authentication protocol for 802.11x. And again, this is what we're going to talk about here. So basically, open system authentication is definitely required. The only thing it requires is a SID broadcast, an SSID broadcast. It's, again, identified by the MAC address. Obviously, there are significant risks here. So, for example, if you're using WEP, this is older technology, then obviously WEP, of course, needs to be verified. But as we've now discovered, WEP is actually a very, very insecure authentication mechanism. You just would not use it. So what are the security goals then for Wi-Fi? So first of all, you need some kind of access control. So how are you going to get access to your network? So by enforcing a access control, it basically provides the mechanism that there's going to be no abuse of the wireless network. And this is obviously very important. This is why you need some kind of key management. So rather than having a pre-shared key, which Obviously, if everybody's using the same key, then it's easy to hack. So some kind of key rotation would be a good idea here, or third-party mechanism. Data integrity. So in the enterprise, it's important that, hey, if I send you a piece of information, if I send you a document, and I'll be talking about this in my Defense Against the Dark Arts session, data integrity is everything. So if you're in the military, for example, and you have to make a very important military decision that can affect the lives of many people, you need to know that that data is genuine and that it's not been changed. Okay, so data integrity, certainly over a wireless type of network, is absolutely critical. And confidentiality. So again, if I send you a piece of information, you have to know, hey, I want to send this in confidence. And how to do that. Obviously, tools like IPsec, SSL, digital certificates. So if you receive a digitally signed email from me, hey, then you know it's from me. Whereas if I send you a spamming message from your bank, then obviously you go, hey, hang on a minute, my bank never sends me messages. Here's a question for you. I want a show of hands here. Do you feel safer in 2011 than you did in 2005? Or do you feel less safe? So let's have a show of hands. Do you feel less safe? Do you think the world in terms of security is a less safe place than it was? Quite a few. Oh, yes. Who feels it's more safe? Okay. You're on your own, by the way. Okay. Okay, fantastic. Great. So wireless standards. Okay, so there are a number of standards that we've mentioned here. The first one then is 802.11 WEP, Wireless Encryption Protocol. Okay, so the thing about WEP, of course, is that it used a single key. It didn't have any kind of key rotation, which was a real issue. 802.11 also, you could, WPA, for example, you could use a third-party authentication mechanism like a Radius server, remote access dial-in user service. Or you could use WPA2, of course. All along, we've talked about adding different layers of encryption for security. And one of the best ones, of course, is AES, the Authenticating Encryption Protocol. By the way, the other side of this sign, see Wi-Fi hotspot? The other side of this sign actually says Bates Motel. Okay. Okay, so shared authentication. So shared authentication ultimately means it utilizes a challenge response mechanism where the user needs to put in a Wi-Fi key or a simple key to gain access to the network. And the problem with this is where there is a single key, there is a single point of failure. So the client request essentially responds to the access point, issues the challenge response to the client puts in the key, and of course then the client gets connected. So very, very weak, and we'll talk about that because there's a whole slide on WEP here. So basically the key length runs in, originally it was 64-bit 128, and then later on it came out in 256 bits. So there were different kind of flavors of wireless access point encryption there. So one of the issues is it basically had no key rotation, and it also used an algorithm called RC4 to encrypt, which RC4, of course, is extremely vulnerable. It's been hacked a number of times. And there are now, just on the internet, I'll show you a couple in a minute, there are just a mountain of tools to allow you to hack and crack these keys. So more problems with WEP. Basically, it utilizes a low initialization vector of 24 bits. It used RC4 encryption. It was too short, so the key storage was too short. Traffic injection attacks were very popular, flip-flop attacks, and so on. TKIP. Okay, so they came up with something called temporal key integrity. And this was designed to kind of, hey, you know, let's try and make WEP a little bit more palatable. However, though, the industry actually saw this as an interim solution. And the real problem here was this RC4 algorithm that WEP used. So this was actually replaced with something called WPA, or Wi-Fi Protected Access. And this is a standard today. It came in 2 flavors, WPA and WPA2. It was designed to distribute the security and make security a lot better. You could either run it in pre-shared key mode or in enterprise mode, as this slide shows. So WPA Personal, you often see this, for example, at home. If you've got a home Wi-Fi router here, it uses a pre-shared key, again, just a single key. You don't need the huge overhead of a very large infrastructure. So each wireless network device authenticates with the access point with the same 256-bit key. So with the enterprise solution, this added a different mechanism. So you could use, for example, third-party mechanisms such as that radius server, what I mentioned. And this obviously added in a much higher level of security and confidence, of course. So this is the right way. So WPA2, it's now recognized 11BI was now the default setting, or should be the default setting on many routers if you buy them. So if you go out and you buy a Wi-Fi router today, the chances are this is going to be the default setting. And definitely if it's not, then definitely make sure that it is. Okay, so very robust, very secure, and I believe WPA has actually been cracked, but WPA2 has not been cracked at the moment, or if it has, it's only in the lab. It's not kind of well known out there. So you can, obviously, anything can be cracked in time, but if you're talking brute force attacks, you're talking a very long time and a very long process of cracking something like this. Okay, so the key thing here is AES. So AES has been proven to be very good. This is a kind of a good kind of slide here. So you can see that with WPA2, for example, they replaced the RC4 mechanism with the AES encryption here. Also, you have dynamic session keys. Automatic distribution is available. So again, if you're looking, good tip, use WPA2. Okay, now let's talk about the myths and threats. So first of all, what are the common myths with Wi-Fi? Well, myth number 1, what if I hide my SSID? Well, that's rubbish, okay? If you hide your SSID, you have to remember that there are still 4 other broadcasts that are going through. So you can see the probe requests, probe responses, association requests, and pre-association requests. They're all still going through. The SSID must be transmitted in clear text or it just won't function, okay? So you can't hide it, you can't put it in, you know, gibberish, it just won't work. So that's myth number 1. Myth number 2, hey, Andy, what if I just used fixed IP addresses in DHCP? Well, it doesn't really matter because whatever you're doing, you're transmitting over in a UDP. So, you know, if you're using tools like Wireshark, it wouldn't take you very long to work out, hey, they're using a fixed IP address range. This is it. Let's hack in. So IP address ranges are easy to figure out. Okay, key thing. Less than a minute. So it's false. Myth number 3. Okay, what if I use MAC authentication? So, no, I don't think so. Because all you're doing there is you're filtering the MAC address, okay? So MAC addresses, again, are transmitted in clear text, extremely easy to capture network-wise, and also very, very easy to clone as well. And you can also change them. So here is an example of a MAC spoofing example. And again, you can try this yourself on a network. This is a very, very easy registry hack. and it shows you how to spoof a MAC address. So, I mean, again, that's a little bit of a myth. I like this one. This is antenna placement and signal suppression. So if I suppress my antenna, will it make any difference? Absolutely not. Like I said, the bad guys have always got bigger antennas than you. Okay, if you'll excuse the expression. So lowering the signal strength, all it does is it just ruins normal guys that are trying to come onto the network. This is interesting as well. A number of government institutions, this is true actually, they actually paint their walls with anti-Wi-Fi paint. Have you seen this? Okay, you can actually buy anti-Wi-Fi paint. And all that does, of course, it's not 100%, but it actually does work. So obviously, if you're in a government institution and you're a little bit paranoid, then this might be for you. Okay, other things, I'll just go through these. War chalking, war driving. Is my time up, or am I okay? I'm okay. Okay, cool. Okay, war chalking, war driving, war flying. Unauthorized access. So unauthorized access can either be unintentional or it can be, it can be intentional or accidental. Man-in-the-middle attack, a denial-of-service attack, cafe latte attack is probably one of the most recent. With a cafe latte attack, hey, why on earth am I trying to hack into the Wi-Fi access point? I'll just basically tune in to everybody that's on the network, download their packets, and eventually I'll get the key. So that was quite clever. Open systems authentication. So wireless LAN threats, obviously the open authentication is a real no-no. So basically we're all on this Microsoft network here. We didn't need any kind of authentication, so Lord knows what you guys are downloading. Okay. Okay, if you want to browse a network, obviously you need a little network device that can basically set you up in promiscuous mode, and that will allow you to monitor the network and see what's actually going on. And you will also need an external antenna as well. Other types of common attacks include things like what we call flood attacks. So basically where you're flooding the network with so much traffic as it just causes a denial of service attack. Or you can obviously have a de-authentication flood attack where you're targeting an individual point here. This is an interesting one, a network jamming attack, denial of service. This is a device that you can buy, again, from certain Chinese websites. And what this does, it basically completely floods the network. It causes basically shuts everything down. It's essentially a magnetron. By the way, if you're standing too close, you'll know because things start dropping off. Okay. Equipment destruction. So obviously targets the access point. So obviously if you actually want, that's physical destruction, obviously. That's the best kind of denial of service attack going, isn't it? Hey, well, apparently now we don't even need to hack Wi-Fi. So let's just move to the Netherlands and we get free Wi-Fi. So it's not, I was actually having a conversation with somebody yesterday. It's not that it's not legal, they're just saying it's not illegal. So this is something that we all know about. We can go out and we can download network scanning tools. So in America here, is it legal for me to run a network scanning tool? Yes or no? Who says yes? No, I didn't come to that. So is it, I mean, I can just scan, yes? Can I scan? The answer is probably yes, I can scan. Because the device, if I'm using Backtrack, for example, that device is doing what you expect it to do. But the thing is, if you actually connect to a network and then proactively probe it, then you're breaking the law, okay? So just remember one thing, though. Yes, it might be free in the Netherlands, but it's definitely not in the US, okay? You will go to jail here. And they are ruthless in the US if you go to jail, by the way. They lock you up forever. So the Patriot Act. So basically, any of these tools, you know, you'll go to jail for a very long time. Okay, so Wi-Fi hacking tools. Okay, so there are a huge number of Wi-Fi hacking tools that you can get. So there's obviously web hacking is a very, very simple process. So you can use tools like Kane Enable here. There's you know, Backtrack and so on. There are many, many different tools to use, and you can download them fairly easily. These are the two, probably the latest tools. So this is a kind of a new generation of tools here. This one is called Fern Wi-Fi Cracker, and you can see that these are both Linux tools, by the way, unfortunately. But Fern Wi-Fi Cracker, again, it's got brute force WPA Wi-Fi decryption mechanisms and also web encryption tools here. So rather than you having to type in lots of ugly commands, now you've got this very nice GUI-based interface. On the right-hand side, there's a little tool here. It's called Grim Weeper. I love that name, Grim Weeper. And again, it does very, very similar tools. So again, you can go in, you can decrypt, for example, web and also WPA attacks here. Okay, and they're downloadable today. You can get those today. So just to show you how easy some of these tools are to find, let me just go to the web first of all. So these are a few things that are on the internet. So this is cert.net, and cert.net is a fantastic place for finding default keys or default passwords. So this contains every single default password for every single device. And it's amazing how many times I go to client site and they're using just the default password. They've never changed it. You know, you go in with admin and it's ABC123 or something like that. So very, very useful. This is every single piece of hardware, not just Wi-Fi routers, but everything. So Cisco boxes, everything. So cert.net is a great place to look. This is another one. This is the default password list. What I'm going to do, guys, is on this slide deck here, I'm going to put a reference, a document with all these web links on so that you don't need to take a note of all of these. Okay, so again, likewise, you can see that it shows you the name of the Wi-Fi device, the version that it's running, the access type, the name, the username that it's running, and also the password here. And again, you can see most of these devices always use the username of admin here. Okay, in terms of web cracking, again, this is quite an interesting website. So this is a web key converter. So how many times do you forget, or you know customers who forgot their web key, but they may know the password? And often the password is something very, very simple. So they'll say, I don't know what my web key is, but I do remember my password. So this is quite useful. You can just go in here and you can type in a password here, whatever it was, and it will go ahead and it will generate those keys for you, whether it be WPA, WEP, 64-bit, or of course you've got the 128-bit here. Of course, this could be then used the alternative way. So you could design a password here, and you could create your own key. So it could either be used to attack, or it could be used as a useful tool, as most security tools are. So that's webkey.com. Again, in terms of cracking Wi-Fi, so you can see that there are tons and tons of useful utilities and links here. All I've done is I've gone into Bing and I've typed in Wi-Fi cracking here, and there are just oodles of tools that will download. Do be careful with some of the tools that you download. I would possibly, don't use them on your live network, obviously, because you will have issues. This is quite an interesting one as well. This is another cracking tool, and there's loads of tools here. So you can see there's like hundreds and hundreds of Wi-Fi cracking tools, Wi-Fi radar and so on. And also now, if you don't have a Wi-Fi tool to use and you want to crack the password, hey, well, this will do it for you. So all you need to do is use Wireshark, capture the traffic, and upload the traffic to this website, and it will come back and say, hey, there you go, that's the WPA key for you. So it takes a lot of the work out the effort. Backtrack 4, obviously, is the tool of choice for many people. Backtrack 4 comes with a whole ton of tools here. So there's things like information gathering tools, network mapping, vulnerability scanning tools, web application analysis, and this is it, obviously, radio network analysis. So you've got 802.11, you've got Bluetooth, and RFID here. So you can see there's none at the moment for NFC, because this is obviously the latest version, but those tools will be coming. So 802.11, if I go into cracking tools, one of the most favorite tools here is, of course, aircrack.ng. So aircrack.ng will allow you to go in and crack those passwords. So again, this is a free tool. You can download it. Backtrack 4, you can either download it in a VM version, or you can go ahead and you can download it in a distributable. Oh, sorry. Just show you this. This is that tool that I mentioned, the Fern tool. And you can see I can go in and I can scan a WEP network. I can go in and do WEP, WPA. Obviously, the first thing you want to do before you do anything there is doing a little bit of reconnaissance. And this is where this tool is called Insider. And Insider is a really useful, it's a spectrum analysis tool. It's a genuine tool here. And you can see it shows me the SSID that we're all connected to at the moment. It shows me the channel that we're on. So again, it's using a number of channels depending on where we are in the building. There's no privacy. Again, the speed rate is showing me here, and also what kind of, how is it set up? Is it set up in ad hoc or infrastructure? So tools like this can be very, very useful. So once I've got access here, obviously then I would use a tool like Wireshark, capture some packets, and then obviously use some of those backtrack tools. The scary thing is they're so easy to get. Okay. So we spoke about where Wi-Fi came from. We spoke about how it's been designed. We spoke about who designed it, why it's been designed. We spoke about the different technologies that are used, so some of them are fairly new. And we've also looked at how easy it is to crack these tools. So what about the countermeasures? What are the options to kind of, what can protect us? So, first of all, if you're using Active Directory, and this is what the SIM 313 session is going to talk about, so securing wireless policies in Active Directory, group policy, and so on. He's going to be looking at that in a couple of days' time. Implement secure management for access point and bridges. So again, use that WPA2 as much security as you can possibly use. Disable things like Telnet, HTTP access, all these other things. Publicly secure packet forwarding, disable that. Virus scanning, definitely have virus scanning. I read a frightening statistic that the other day that said 50% of Microsoft customers don't keep their systems up to date. 50%, they don't patch their systems. And a lot of this is actually in Asia and the Middle East and Africa. So again, maybe it's an education thing. We need to tell people about that. Look at things like radio frequency monitoring. Look out for rogue access points. take a tip from Andy. Never, ever connect to a site that says free Wi-Fi access. Okay? I mean, come on. You know? It's like, hack me now. Okay. Definitely use some kind of intrusion prevention system. And you can also get a wireless IPS technologies as well. I don't know if you've seen Forefront Threat Management Gateway, TMG. If you haven't seen it, go onto the show floor, have a look at the Forefront booth. It's a great product, it really is. What about the home user then? So we spoke about enterprise, secure it, radius servers, certificates, Active Directory. What about the home user? Well, the thing about the home user is all of us. We all have this technology at home. So obviously, think about changing your SSID name. It doesn't really make any difference. Set up MAC filters to limit which computers can connect to the actual router itself. Ensure that you use WPA. And definitely, I don't know how many people don't do this, but review your wireless logs. Just have a look at what's going on, who's connecting you, who's probing your network. Okay. Look out for upgrades as well. So if the manufacturer's got an upgrade to the firmware, definitely go ahead and do that. And also practice good security elsewhere. Things like AV, anti-spyware, and so on. So Andy, what's the holy grail of wireless security? What do you think it is? The user? Any others? My answer to you is this. If you're really worried, that's it. Okay? Okay. Okay, so what have we talked about? We talked about wireless intro. We talked about current and emerging technologies. We've looked at wireless security. They call it the great oxymoron, but it really doesn't have to be. We spoke about the standards and technologies. We spoke about threats and countermeasures, and I hope a few best practices. Hey, I've got a really cool session tomorrow, Lessons from Hackwarts. Come and see it. It's very, very cool. And also, we've got the cybercrime panel. That's the SIM 327 session, and also the SIM 313, which is kind of the other half, if you will, of this session. So that's going to be interesting.